Welcome to Global Tales Expo, where we examine real decisions, real capabilities, and the strategic forces shaping today's world.
In recent months, discussions inside the United States Congress have revealed something that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. American lawmakers are openly questioning whether retired U.S. Navy warships should be transferred directly to allies facing increasing pressure in contested waters. Among the countries most frequently mentioned in these discussions is the Philippines. This is not rumor. It is not speculation from social media. It is part of a broader debate taking place in hearings, defense assessments, and strategic reviews. The question being asked is direct and uncomfortable. If the United States is retiring powerful surface combatants while allies struggle to deter coercion, does it make strategic sense to scrap these ships, or should some of them be transferred to frontline partners? To understand why this idea has gained traction, we need to look at three realities unfolding at the same time. The changing structure of the U.S. Navy, the security situation in the West Philippine Sea, and the limits of traditional military assistance. For the United States Navy, warship retirement has become routine. Aging cruisers and destroyers are being phased out as part of fleet modernization. These ships are not necessarily obsolete. Many still carry advanced radar systems, missile launchers, and command control capabilities. But they are expensive to operate, manpower intensive, and increasingly costly to maintain as spare parts become scarce. Congress is well aware of this. Each year, lawmakers approve budgets that include billions of dollars for new shipbuilding, while simultaneously authorizing the decommissioning of older vessels. This creates a paradox. The United States possesses warships that are still militarily relevant, yet chooses to retire them due to long-term cost considerations rather than combat ineffectiveness. At the same time, Congress receives regular briefings on the Indo-Pacific security environment. These briefings are increasingly blunt. They describe a region where naval power matters, where gray zone operations are routine, and where allies are expected to hold their ground under constant pressure. In this context, the Philippines occupies a unique position. The Philippines is a treaty ally of the United States. It sits at a geographic crossroads between the Pacific Ocean and the South China Sea. Its waters include some of the most strategically important sea lanes in the world. Yet for decades, its navy has been structured primarily for patrol, law enforcement support, and internal security tasks, rather than high-end naval combat. That mismatch is no longer theoretical. Chinese Coast Guard and maritime militia vessels now operate persistently in areas claimed by the Philippines. Resupply missions to outposts like Ayungin Shoal face interference. Incidents are documented, protested, and recorded, but they continue. From Washington's perspective, this creates a dilemma. Diplomatic support alone does not change behavior at sea. Training programs take years to show results. New shipbuilding for allies can take a decade from contract to delivery. Congress is asking whether there is a faster way to strengthen deterrence. That is where the idea of donating warships enters the discussion. This would represent a major shift in U.S. policy. Historically, American warship transfers to allies have been limited to patrol vessels, Coast Guard cutters, or heavily downgraded ships. Even then, transfers were carefully managed to avoid escalation or long-term dependency. What is now being discussed goes further. Lawmakers are questioning whether certain retired surface combatants, particularly cruisers and destroyers, could be transferred with their core capabilities intact, supported by training and logistics agreements. The rationale is straightforward. A single modern warship can have an outsized deterrent effect. It forces adversaries to factor in escalation risks. It changes operational planning. It raises the political cost of coercion. For the Philippines, Ebanwan Hayen's surface combatant would represent a step change in naval capability. Supporters of the idea argue that deterrence is not about matching China ship for ship. It is about creating uncertainty. A navy that can impose costs, even locally and temporarily, alters calculations. It reduces the likelihood that coercive tactics will succeed without consequences. They also point out that the United States already bears the cost of building these ships. Transferring them rather than scrapping them extracts additional strategic value from sunk investments. From this perspective, donating warships is not generosity, it is efficiency. However, critics raise serious concerns. Operating a major surface combatant is expensive. Crews must be trained in complex systems. Maintenance requires specialized facilities. Supply chains must be reliable. Without sustained support, a donated warship can quickly become a financial burden. The Philippine Navy already faces resource constraints. Even maintaining its current fleet requires careful budgeting. Adding a cruiser or a large destroyer would stretch manpower and logistics significantly. Congressional discussions reflect this reality. Proposals are rarely framed as simple handovers. They emphasize conditional transfers tied to long-term support arrangements, joint training pipelines, and interoperability frameworks. In other words, the ship would not stand alone. It would be part of a broader alliance structure. There is also a political dimension. If the United States donates warships, it becomes indirectly linked to how those ships are used. Any confrontation involving a donated vessel would draw international attention and political pressure. Congress understands this risk, but many lawmakers argue that the greater risk lies in doing nothing. A weakened ally invites coercion, miscalculation, and escalation under less controlled conditions. From this viewpoint, strengthening allied deterrence is a stabilizing move, not a provocative one. For the Philippines, the implications are profound. Accepting a donated warship would immediately elevate the Navy's profile. It would enhance command and control experience, accelerate doctrinal development, and deepen integration with U.S. and allied forces. But it would also impose discipline. Maintenance schedules would be unforgiving. Training standards would rise. Budget priorities would shift. This is why Philippine defense planners approach the idea cautiously. The question is not whether such a ship would be powerful. The question is whether it would be sustainable. Another factor influencing congressional thinking is precedent. The Philippines has successfully integrated transferred vessels before. Former U.S. Coast Guard cutters became the backbone of Philippine surface operations for years. While less complex than cruises, they demonstrated that transfer programs can work when properly supported. Lawmakers point to this history as evidence that the Philippine Navy can absorb advanced platforms if given time and assistance. At the same time, they acknowledge that a cruiser or destroyer represents an entirely different level of complexity. There is also an alternative view gaining ground in Congress. Some argue that instead of donating large warships, the United States should focus on distributed capabilities, shore-based missile systems, surveillance networks, unmanned platforms, and aircraft can provide deterrence without the burden of maintaining a large surface combatant. This debate reflects a broader shift in naval warfare. Modern conflict favors networks over individual platforms. A single powerful ship is less effective without sensor coverage, air support, and layered defense. For an archipelagic nation like the Philippines, smaller, dispersed assets may offer better survivability. Congress has not reached consensus on this issue. That is what makes the current moment significant. The fact that warship donation is being discussed at all signals a recognition that existing approaches may be insufficient. China's role looms over every aspect of this debate. Any transfer of U.S. warships to the Philippines would be closely monitored by Beijing. It would likely be framed as escalation, regardless of defensive intent. Yet congressional analysts argue that China has already escalated through persistent coercion. In their view, deterrence has eroded precisely because responses have been too restrained. Restoring balance, they argue, requires visible capability. Ultimately, the decision will not rest on emotion or symbolism. It will rest on cost, sustainability, and strategic alignment. If warships are donated, they will come with conditions, training requirements, support agreements, operational expectations. If they are not, Congress will likely pursue alternative ways to accelerate Philippine defense capacity.